So this week's topic is racism, and it's a tough topic, a tough issue to think about, to write about, to talk about. And there's, more importantly than just being tough, like, it's such a broad and diverse issue. So it's kind of like, how do you pick a certain angle to go at? How do you know exactly which aspect of racism to deal with in a limited amount of time? And so kind of covered a few different things this week. But I think running through all of those ways that we've explored racism this past week, in the back of all that, I've kind of had this question of, like, I understand, at least in some sense, or at least I can deal with the fact that racism exists. I can at least understand, like, where it comes from or what causes it. But the hard thing is understanding when it is present in such a overt and such a terrible and open and public way. Like, the hard thing I struggle with is, like, how does no one do anything about it? Like, how does someone get tarred and feathered in the middle of town? How does someone, get beat up in the middle of a football stadium? How do these things happen in a way that, everyone's around? Like, there's so many people there who aren't that different than me, and they somehow just freeze and don't do anything. That's, to me, like, the biggest question I struggle with. And I was reminded in thinking about that, of a story that I came across, I think, one of the psychology classes I took in college, the story of Kitty Genovese. And if you're not familiar, Kitty Genovese has a really sad story of back in 1964, she was attacked. She lived in New York City. She was on her way home late at night, and she was attacked and real violently stabbed over the course of like half an hour, and eventually died because of it. And that's a horrible thing. That's obviously terrible in and of itself. But the reason that we still talk about Kitty Genovese 40 plus years later, it isn't just that she was what happened to her, but it's the fact that there were numerous people over the course of that half hour of her being murdered who saw or heard or watched from their balconies or from other parts of the neighborhood where she was, and none of them did anything about it. None of them called the police. Nothing happened. This went on for half an hour with no one doing anything about it, despite anywhere from a dozen people up to as high as 38, depending on the reports you read. And that's just shocking to me. And psychologists, use these terms of, like, it's the bystander effect, and it's about diffusion of responsibility, and how, the more people that are involved in something, the less likely you are to, take any initiative on your own. The people who are there just kind of assume someone else would call. One of the lines that someone was quoted as saying is that, they didn't call the police because the person said, I didn't want to get involved. And to call the police, or to, of course, to go down and do something actually, would be, putting yourself into a situation that you wanted to remain outside of. And that's, I think it's fair to say to all of us, that's just horrifying that someone could feel that way about someone being murdered. And yet there's examples of this all the time, and we saw them this week. I was shocked when I saw the video from the BBC documentary that aired Monday night about the upcoming Euro football tournament, or the soccer tournament. And the bizarre thing, I mean, there's so many different examples in there, but the one that stuck with me is a lot like the Kitty Genovese story. Is there's this huge stadium, thousands and thousands of people there, and this family or group of people sitting in the family section front row of the family section gets beat up in the middle of the game. These people who were clearly incredibly racist, they walked from their section over to the other section and literally attacked these people because they were Asian. They were actually cheering for the same team, and they still went over there, beat them up, attacked them just because they're Asian. But again, the shocking thing is not that as much as it is that that no one did anything. And you see the video and the documentary, and there's police around, they don't do anything. There's fans all around them, they don't do anything. Finally, after I think it's a few minutes, one of the stadium staff comes over and separates them, but that's it. No one else did anything, and that's happening now. That's not 1964. That's not, lynchings and tarring and feathering in the South 10, 20, or 50 years ago. That's happening here now, and that's amazing. And so I think the thing that I keep getting back to is that, it's not enough, I guess, to talk about the problems that are out there. It's not enough to kind of be able to say, oh, that's the bystander effect, or sometimes called the Genovese effect, and explain away what's happening, because we can do that. We can understand what caused people to not do something. But kind of what yesterday's post was about is that describing the way the world is, doesn't take away the responsibility of working for the world to be the way it could be, the way it should be. And that is a responsibility that we all have, and that's always a difficult thing. You look at all the people who stood up for something, who made racism less common than it is today. They said they have felt the bystander effect too. They felt diffusion of responsibility too, but they didn't let that stop them from acting. And so I think the thing that, is just kind of running through my mind is like, what would I do if I was in that stadium and saw these people getting attacked right there? Like, it's hard to picture myself in those stands, in that situation, and to say, like, would I do something? Like, what would happen there? And maybe that's a question you can't answer until you get in it. But I don't know. I feel like these things aren't worth talking about unless we turn it back on ourselves. It's not just their problem. It's not just someone 50 years ago or someone in another part of the world who has these problems. And maybe our problem that we deal with, maybe the problem I see outside today isn't racism as much as it's something totally different. Maybe it's the mental illness taboo we talked about last week. There's always going to be something like that. And so the question that I'm going to keep asking myself, and the question I would leave you with as we wrap up this week, I guess, is, what am I doing? What are the injustices that I see outside my door when I go to the grocery store, when I walk down the street, and what am I doing about them?